Klaus said, I'm a professor in the School of Management at Ryerson University. However, my research is involved in inclusive media and design. And one of the areas that we work really hard in is broadcast accessibility, but not just broadcast, theater, music, television, and film. And one of the really exciting things for me to hear from Media4D is that they're actually interested in looking at what happens with content. And I know that the broadcasters particularly are struggling in this world and trying to find their way, just as the music producers have tried to find their way as well. And so they're in for a rough ride, I'm afraid. But maybe the music industry can help them make it a bit easier. However, it's really nice to see that they're actually, especially in Europe, moving forward. I can't say that the North American television people are so progressive, Matthias. Well done. All right, so what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about the work that we've been doing with respect to, I'll try and keep it to accessible television, and some of the innovation work. So while we've heard a little bit about what the television people are thinking and the broadcasters, they tend to focus a lot on infrastructure and numbers, audiences, as they should. But what was pointed out is that the content producers are also part of this mix. And we have yet to hear much from them, and they kind of are trying to hide, but they cannot hide for much longer. So what I want to do is I'll tell you a little bit about what users have told us. So that's where we begin, is what users want to, or audiences, as we maybe talk about in the industry. So one of the things that we hear a lot from users or audiences with disabilities is they want to be entertained just like everybody else. It's not about being informed. And that there's quality and quantity issues. So from a lot of blind people and deaf people, a really big topic is 100% access. So access to everything. That includes advertising, that includes all the different bits that are online, as well as the actual content. And that it needs to have good quality. What that means is an interesting problem to try and wrestle with, and that there isn't a good answer for that yet. However, at least in Canada, in our regulation, the broadcast regulations for television are there's requirement of 100% captioning. They forgot the word good, and as a result, we end up with a big mess. And audio description is following that path, and we have an opportunity to actually stop that from happening. The thing that motivates the content producers is this concept of regulation. And Matthias talked about net neutrality, but we don't have that in the broadcast industry or the film industry. We have regulation. And there's regulation pretty well everywhere, although China's not there yet, but they will be, I think. And so there's a number of different organizations all over the world responsible for these regulations around accessibility and broadcasting. So in Canada, it's the CRTC. In the US, it's the FCC. There's Ofcom in the US. There's the European Commission. There's a whole bunch of different regulators that tell us what we have to do. And the content producers and the broadcasters look at regulation as a requirement, not as a motivator. So it's something they have to do in a box they have to check, and that's it. And they're not really willing to listen to any more. However, now with the new infrastructure issues coming along and the audience, the change in audience behavior, maybe they want to consider accessibility opportunities rather than as requirements. And I often hear from the content producers, well, it just costs too much money. And we have so much trouble trying to figure out our business models already. Adding all this other stuff in it's just going to cost too much money. It takes too much time and too much money. And then the distributors, like the television channels, Again, they want to meet regulations, and that's about it. They always talk about money and how much it costs. And they also talk about timelines. So because accessibility is usually considered as an afterthought in this world, that means that the program is delivered to the show is delivered to the broadcaster or the distributor of the content, and within 24 hours they have to have it captioned, audio described, and everything else done, and then broadcast. So often their turnaround time is 24 hours, which is not a huge time. So there's a lot of expediency issues. All right, so from our point of view, in my research lab, and what I like to encourage is to look at inclusive media from a little different perspective, more of a using the social model of disability rather than the medical model of disability, where the people are not the problem, the system's the problem, and we need to solve the system problems. So in media then, the philosophy that we take is that, first of all, it's a creative process. So media production is creative, and accessibility to that media is also a creative process. And that means it's not easy to subject it to regulation, and I'm not sure whether it should be subjected to regulation, just like we don't regulate painting or we don't regulate dance. We shouldn't regulate audio description in the way that it's being done. As Media4D proposes, and I couldn't agree with them more, is that the creative team, the people who make the work, make the video content or the audio content, need to have control of it. It's part of the show. It means it needs to be controlled by the people who make the show. And I always give an example to when I speak with directors and actors and people in the industry. They wouldn't give away costume design or set design. Why would they give away captioning? It's part of the show. It's how the audience receives, or how a deaf audience receives that show. So they shouldn't give it away to anybody but themselves. And as we heard, amateurs have a place. The example was sign language translation of educational content. But for a blind audience, they've had audio descriptions since there's been blind people in the world. And that's been done usually by family members, by friends. So why not give them a chance to record what they're doing already? And audio description is a very difficult process. It's highly cognitively intense. And a lot of people who are friends and family members of blind people have figured that out, and have figured out ways to do it, figured out really interesting ways to do it. Okay. I'm going to maybe just show you one video. I have a couple of videos, but we don't have very much time. All right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about captioning and audio description, and a little bit about sensory substitution opportunities. So in captioning then, sorry, I come from North America, and we call the words that you see on the screen there, the white text on the black background, captions. In Europe, it's called subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, I believe. And I'm not sure in Japan what it's called, but I think it's subtitling. So I don't want to confuse people. All right, so what users have told us is that they wanted advertising included. And in North America, you tend to see us sometimes, not all the time. They will also want accuracy. They want it to be accurate. That's part of the good description. And because the good is usually missing from the definition of captioning in the regulations, we get things like spelling mistakes. We get missing words, or we get word lines that are missing completely. However, it's still in the caption track, and so it's the tick. We got the captioning. It doesn't matter that there's spelling mistakes. The other problem is speaker identification. Who's talking is a really difficult issue for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And some of the solutions are to put little arrows in, or names. So if you put in the name of a person in the caption or subtitle, before that person's named, then you've misrepresented the content. It's also hard to tell if you have multiple people on screen which one is which. In Europe, or at least in the UK, they use colors, but the colors are randomly assigned. It's sort of first in gets the blue, and so it's inconsistent across shows and inconsistent within shows, so you can't rely on color. So speaker ID is a problem, and of course the area that I do my research in is a piece of content. The soundtrack in a piece of content is not just about words. There's other sound, like music and speech prosody and sound effects, that's completely missing pretty well from captions or subtitling. And the way in which music is done, let's say an example up on the screen, is little music notes. Well, if you're deaf, little music notes don't necessarily mean much. And it's not the song itself that's important. It's the meaning behind that song. It's the emotion that that song's representing. Okay, so we are done quite a bit of work on trying to find ways to express the other sound information. And I've shown a couple of things at ICCHP before, and so I won't show you that video because I know we're short on time. Yes, class? Okay. But we've designed an open source tool called Enact, which allows you to make animated captions or animated subtitles that add the emotion back into the words. And you can add emotion from the songs, you can add emotions from the voice intonation, or you can add the sound effect. And we have a tool for speaker identification, which uses avatars and images of the individual, plus colors that represent the costumes, so that you can more easily identify who's talking. All right, I'll get to audio description, which I think has more opportunity in the business side of things. And that's one of the really important things that we cannot forget in the accessibility, inclusive media world, at least anyway, is the business is really important. So what our users say is they want 100%. And in Canada, in the US, I'm not sure about the EU, but it's probably similar. The regulation now says 4 hours per week of audio description is required of the major broadcasters. And people who are blind have no choice of what 4 hours the broadcasters are going to choose. And they also have no choice about when it's going to be broadcast. So that's not nearly 100%. And at the moment, the road of captioning or of audio description is the road of captions, which is done as an afterthought. So the content is delivered, and either the broadcaster or actually the studio will send it away to somebody else to get captioned or audio described, and it'll come back. Nobody looks at it again after that's done, except for the audiences. So it's delivered and broadcast. However, audio description shouldn't be done that way, especially. In particular, it's a creative process. Does everybody here know what audio description is? Yes? More or less? Okay, good. So I won't define it. Ben. Okay. So the one thing about audio description compared to captioning, because it's a very limited set of descriptions, because the opportunity for description is very short. You have to insert the description in between the dialogue. So you have a couple of seconds, and you have maybe 50 of those couple of seconds to actually describe the important visual information. Well, that's an impossible task. You cannot describe everything. So somebody has to decide what to describe, how to describe it, the vocabulary, and how fast it should be. And that's a creative process. That's not any sort of standard thing that you could come up with. That needs to be under the control of the creative team. And then audio description has an opportunity for a business model, which captioning doesn't. I haven't figured it out yet for captioning, but I will. But I figured it out for audio description. What we've been working on with audio description then is to bring in the creative teams to be responsible for the audio description. And we've worked with a whole lot of directors and actors in all kinds of different venues, from community theater up through Cannes Film Festival films, and everything in between, television and theater. And what happens is, as I expected, is directors and actors will take lots of different approaches. I can't predict what they're going to do with the audio description at all. But they definitely have their own style and their own way of doing things. And there's not very many rules that they have to follow with respect to audio description. You just can't talk over dialogue, more or less. And because I work at Ryerson, which has a film and television school, as well as a radio and television arts school, I have an opportunity to work with new directors and students learning this. So we may have some better opportunities for dissemination. And I don't think I'm going to show you this either. But one of the first directors that we worked with decided to take a first-person narrative approach to the audio description. So the audio describer was describing from the future. And it's a common technique used in television and film for narrators. And so that's the approach that they decided to use. And they used the main voice actor, it was an animated series, as the describer. And what they came up with was a very entertaining series for a blind audience and for a sighted audience. And if you want to see it, you can see it later, or you can visit our website. So as a result of that work, we developed a tool called Live Describe and a web version, which is part of YouTube, to allow people to make descriptions however they want to describe, as amateurs or as professionals. And you can find Live Describe online. It's open source if you want to play with it that way, or if you just want to use it. And we're working with the Smith Cattlewell Eye Institute in San Francisco to have a database of audio description that people can add to and search and combine with their television and film requests. So we may have 13 or 14 versions of the same audio descriptions of the same show. So there's offering choice, which is important. And then we do some work on audio on sensory substitution, which is pushing things even further. So we have some work in music visualization to bring the music component into a more visual domain rather than description or animations. And then just quickly, we have other sensory substitution techniques that use vibrotactile stimuli. And so we have a device called the Emotichair, which we've installed in theaters, that allows people to feel music. And from that, we've launched a new art form called vibrotactile music, and we've built some instruments, and we have built a whole new lab where artists and musicians who are with disabilities and without disabilities are coming together to create this new art form. And I'm kind of excited to see what it's going to take, what form it's going to take. And this is now a new opportunity for the broadcasters, the cinema people, the people in theater, to expand their offerings to audiences. So another business model that's being offered. Okay, so we've done a lot of work, and I'm so happy to see the broadcasters, in Europe at least, finally starting to embrace some of these ideas. And but we still have a lot of work to do with content producers. They're unbelievably conservative. And we cannot have quantity, we cannot have 100% of anything without considering the quality. And if there are any regulators in this room, that's a really important thing to consider. I know it's hard, but it's important. Okay. And, merci, bienvenue, and welcome to ICCHP.